The Lenovo Legion Go has been out for a few weeks now, and it's already received a lot of updates to make it feel better, and I've had mine for about a week and a couple days, and I've really got to see the strengths and weaknesses of this handheld. And in today's video, we're going to be taking a close look at the Lenovo Legion Go in its early form and seeing how this handheld is currently doing in the short time frame that it's been out for. And towards the end, I'll share with you guys why I'm finding it hard to recommend the Legion Go over its competitors, the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck. So without further ado, let's get into it. The screen of the Legion Go is one of the things that really stands out when using this handheld. It's an impressive 8.8 inch screen, which is larger than any of my other handhelds. It's got a high refresh rate of 144 Hertz, and the resolution is rather high as well, coming in at 2560 by 1600p. And if we're being honest, there's not that many AAA games you're going to be playing at that resolution, but I guess it is nice to have that resolution because this is a computer at the end of the day. You can do other things like, I don't know, watch YouTube, browse the internet, you get it. It also has a wider color gamut than the ROG Ally, which has a 100% sRGB display. Here on the Legion Go, we have a 97% DCI-P3 panel. And if you don't know, DCI-P3 covers a wider color range than sRGB. So the display on the Legion Go can display more colors than the ROG Ally, which already has an impressive screen. And let me tell you guys, when playing games, it looks absolutely great. The colors pop and it can get nice and bright up to 500 nits. But there is one area that the Legion Go screen does lack, and that is there is no VRR. And just like I said in my first impressions video, I still think this is an important and a necessary feature to have, because when you're playing those AAA games, drops in FPS are going to occur. Like, there's no other way around it. And just having VRR in place is going to minimize screen tearing and stuttering. And just overall, it's going to give you a better experience. And now that I think about it, it feels like the ROG Ally screen kind of spoiled us with having variable refresh rate. You might be surprised, but holding the Legion Go in the hands is actually quite comfortable. The Legion Go does give off a bulky look, but Lenovo did a great job in making the controllers ergonomic and easy to grip. They have an aggressive curve that lets your fingers wrap around the device, which allows me to feel confident and comfortable holding the device. It does weigh more than my other handhelds, coming in at 852 grams. And for reference, my second heaviest handheld, the Steam Deck, weighs in at 669 grams. But honestly, when I'm using it with both hands, the weight doesn't really bother me, but it's when I'm using it with one hand and I'm trying to use the touch controls, that's when my hand will get fatigued after a bit. Build quality does feel good, and we get a kickstand to accommodate the detachable controllers. The buttons on the Legion Go are another positive. The ABXY buttons are nice and tactile. And the D-pad does look similar to the Steam Deck's, but it feels much different. This one on the Legion Go is flat when pressed and gives off a nice tactile feedback, whereas on the Deck, it has some travel and is more membrane-like when pressed. The back buttons are nice and clicky, same with the shoulder buttons, but one of the highlights of the Legion Go is the triggers. They're really smooth and they have a deep travel, which makes them feel really satisfying to press. The thumbsticks are Hall effect sticks, which are great for preventing stick drift, but I'm not really a fan of their small size because I play a lot of first-person shooters, and I find that I overcompensate when trying to aim because I don't have that much room to make those small micro adjustments. And I just end up getting served in Halo, Call of Duty, you name it. FPS mode seemed really gimmicky to me at first, but after actually using it, I found that it's pretty accurate and it's very simple to put together. Just detach the controllers, align it with the stand, flip the switch to FPS, and that's it. It acts like a vertical mouse, and you use the M1 and M2 buttons as your left and right clicks. It did take time for me to adjust to it, but after a bit, I got the hang of it. I would recommend removing the thumbstick topper on the right controller because it doesn't let your hand rest properly. It awkwardly touches the palm of your hand when you're holding it. You can also use the controllers wirelessly and play in tabletop mode, similar to the Nintendo Switch, which is pretty cool. And also, I really appreciate that Lenovo did include a quality case. It's a hard case, so you're gonna get pretty good protection out of this thing. And it has a little compartment to place the mouse attachment thingy. And there's this cool little strap too that sits under the Legion Go. So when you take it out of the case, you just pull the strap up and the Go comes out easily. For me, this case is more than enough, and it saves me from having to go and buy a case for it. When it comes to the speakers on the Legion Go, I don't think they're as good as the ROG Ally or the Steam Deck. Like, I'm not saying you're not gonna be able to hear things, but when it comes to just overall the loudness and the sound clarity, they're not as good as the Steam Deck or the ROG Ally. And to add to this, the speakers are mounted on the top, so the sound is going to be going away from you and not towards you like the ROG Ally or the Steam Deck. But here's a quick sound test comparing the Legion Go to the Steam Deck and ROG Ally.
Yesterday's body count lottery rounded out to a solid and sturdy 30. 10 out of Haywood, thanks to unabated gang wars. One officer down, so I guess you're all screwed, cause the NCPD will not let that go. Got another blackout in Santo Domingo. Net runners are at it again, poking holes in the power grid. While over in Westbrook, trauma teams scraping cyber-psycho victims off the pavement.
Windows 11 actually runs pretty decent on here because of the larger screen. Icons feel a lot more natural and easier to press as opposed to on the Ally where everything is sort of squished together because it has a smaller screen. And of course, the addition of the touchpad makes it even more user-friendly. So I definitely think the Legion Go does offer a better Windows 11 experience than the ROG Ally. And wow guys, this thing is really snappy too when browsing the internet or just watching YouTube. Like, it's really quick. You could definitely use it like a normal desktop to do light tasks and things like that. Moving on to Legion Space, this is Lenovo's custom UI and it has a very simple layout and it can easily be navigated by pressing this little menu sign which pops up a side menu where you can see recently played games, access the main settings, or simply go to the homepage of Legion Space. And speaking of this, in the Legion Space homepage at the top is where you can find game recommendations and download popular game launchers. Below that is where you can find cloud games and you can even add different cloud game launchers, but the default app is the Xbox one. Then there's the game store where you can, well, buy games, and you can also add different game stores such as Steam, Xbox, GOG, and more. Right beside that sits the library where you can add all your games into one spot so you don't have a cluttered desktop full of game shortcuts like me. And then to the right of that, we have the full settings where you can change things like network, controller settings, and add game profiles. And lastly, we have Android games where you can download and play mobile games through the Amazon App Store. So if you're into mobile games, you can check out the selection that's in there. Below that, we essentially have ads of games that are on sale from Games Planet, which is a video game key seller. And honestly, there are some pretty good deals on here. I picked up Red Dead Redemption 2 for like $19, but it was a bit odd because after I bought it, it said that it needed to be reviewed. So I thought I would share that with you guys in case you guys buy any of these discounted games, that there's like some sort of review process after buying it. I've never bought a game from Games Planet before, so I'm guessing this is just a thing that they do. There's also the quick settings menu, and in here you can quickly change the TDP, resolution, refresh rate, and more. But yeah, in its current state, Legion Space doesn't feel great. Like, I like the features that it has, but in terms of user experience, it feels behind Armoury Crate when it launched with the Ally, and it's definitely nowhere near the user experience of SteamOS. It's gonna need more updates to make it feel as smooth or in line with Armoury Crate on the Ally, which is more feature-packed and snappier. Alright, so now let's talk performance. So this shares the same Ryzen Z1 Extreme processor that's found in the ROG Ally, but it has faster RAM clocked in at 7500 megahertz, and in my testing, I played most of my games at 30-watt TDP, and I did install the latest AMD drivers. Taking a look at Spider-Man Remastered with the low preset and FSR 2.1 in balanced at 720p resolution, while swinging through New York, we get a very playable frame rate average in the high 70s and low 80s. Our frame time graph could be better though because it is showing some spikes, but for the most part, it's relatively smooth. Switching over to 900p, we still maintain a playable frame rate average in the mid 70s, so we did lose a few frames, but not really enough to make a big difference, which is good to see. Funny enough though, our 1% low is actually better here at 900p than 720p, and the frame time graph looks smoother as well. We still get those spikes, but overall the graph does look smoother at 900p, which is surprising. At 1080p, once again, we still maintain a playable frame rate that hovers in the high 50s and low 60s. However, this time we do lose quite a bit of frames compared to 900p, and our frame time graph does appear to be more spiky than 900p. But overall, I would say Spider-Man Remastered is very playable on the Legion Go. Next up, we have the Division 2 running at the low preset, and the render resolution is set to 75% by default. And at 720p, while exiting the camp here, we do get some aggressive spikes on the frame time graph. But once we get out, it does begin to smooth, and we're hitting those nice high frame rates in the high 80s, even while engaging in a gunfight. Switching over to 900p, we gain some visual clarity, but we do drop into the low 80s this time. But honestly, we're not losing that much performance. And once again, our 1% low seemed to improve by like 1 or 2 frames. Surprisingly, at 1080p, we don't lose that much performance from 900p because we're still averaging in the high 70s and low 80s, which is awesome to see. Next up, we have Halo Infinite running at 720p with the low preset, and we get a high frame rate in the low 70s, and this game looks absolutely gorgeous even with the low graphic settings. And gunfights are very satisfying, but for some reason when I was testing this game at 720p, it would cut off some of my HUD. As you can see, my radar is a bit cut off, same with my ammo count. Moving over to 900p at 100% render resolution, we gained some visual quality, and we also fixed that HUD issue we encountered at 720p. And once again, the game looks great, and we are averaging in the mid 60s, so we did lose some frames from 720p. At 1080p with 100% render resolution, we do drop below that 60 FPS sweet spot, we're now hovering in the low to mid 50s. Surprisingly though, our frame time graph does look pretty smooth for the most part. I did try dropping the render resolution to 75% at 1080p, and the game in my opinion still looks great, but we do gain some blurriness to the image quality. But we do gain a lot of performance, boosting us to a frame rate average in the low 70s, which is a much better frame rate, especially in a competitive shooter like Halo. In Cyberpunk 2077, with the low preset running at 720p and FSR 2.1 set to performance, we do get a frame rate average in the high 50s to low 60s, but this game really seems to struggle maintaining a stable FPS when driving around the city. If you look at our frame time graph, it's very spiky and you can see the stutters while driving around. Switching over to 900p, we do lose about 10 plus frames as we're averaging the high 40s. Going over to 1080p, surprisingly, we don't lose that much performance from 900p. We're still in the high 40s, so that is pretty interesting. Playing an older AAA game like Battlefield 3, which still holds up graphically and has one of the best gunplay I've ever experienced, at medium settings at 720p resolution, the Z1 Extreme handles this game extremely well, as we're pretty much averaging 90 plus FPS for the most part. Switching over to 900p, once again, our frame time graph smooths out even more, and we're still hovering in that 90 plus FPS mark. And at 1080p, we actually don't lose that much performance from 900p, as we're still averaging in the 90s, which is great to see. These older AAA games really shine on these handheld PCs because they take advantage of the high refresh rate displays, and some still hold up really well graphically even today, like Battlefield 3, and they're just overall less demanding on the APU. Now, despite this impressive performance, I don't know if it's just me, but I don't feel like I'm getting consistent performance with the Legion Go. Like sometimes I feel like this thing struggles to maintain good performance even while plugged in and the TDP is cranked to 30 watts. I definitely feel like I'm getting less performance and more stutters in gameplay than the ROG Ally, despite this having faster RAM, so I'm not really sure what's going on here, and it is kind of concerning. Battery life, like any other handheld PC, isn't that great either on the Legion Go. I usually play this thing with my TDP cranked up to 30 watts, and I usually get like maybe an hour of gameplay when I'm playing like a AAA game. But of course, this is going to vary depending on the type of game you're playing and the TDP that you have it set at. So the lower the TDP and the less demanding game you're playing, the more battery life you're going to get out of it. When it comes to storage, we do get two options with the Legion Go, 1 terabyte and 512 gigs. The difference between the two is only like $50, so I would recommend just picking up the 1 terabyte version because we're already spending $700, so what's an extra 50? Plus, I feel like 1 terabyte is like a happy medium because it does allow you to download quite a few games. Now, of course, with this being a new handheld, of course there are issues that I ran into. The main ones being sometimes when I try to log into something, the keyboard doesn't show up. So I'll literally have to dock this thing and plug in my keyboard just to log into something, which is kind of unacceptable. Another issue that I ran into was that the FPS monitor just doesn't work. It does not record the FPS. It just stays at 0. But luckily I use MSI Afterburner to record my FPS, but once again, for your average Joe, that is unacceptable. Also, some games don't recognize the controller input, like in Battlefield 3, but this isn't specific to Legion Go. This happens on the Ally as well, but I still figured I'd mention this. So right now, in its current state, I am finding it a bit hard to recommend picking up the Legion Go over its competitors, the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck, because for one, they're cheaper than the Legion Go, especially the Ally, which is more of a direct competitor to the Legion Go. You can pick up the Z1 Extreme variant of that for $619 as of the recording of this video. And to add to this, those other handhelds just simply function better than the Legion Go when it comes to their custom UIs, such as Armory Crate for the Ally and SteamOS for the Steam Deck. Also, the gaming performance that I'm getting with the Legion Go at 30 watts seems to be worse than my ROG Ally, and the experience is smoother on the Ally because of VRR, which might not be important to some of you, but in my opinion, if you're going to be placing a high refresh rate display on a handheld, you might as well include VRR. That way, those stutters and those screen tears are minimized. Yes, the detachable controllers, FPS mode, and screen are positives of the Legion Go, but when it comes down to the core user experience, right now the Ally just offers a better experience in my opinion because it's had that time to iron out a lot of its faults, which is what the Lenovo Legion Go is doing right now currently. But I'm gonna hold on to the Legion Go and give it some more time to get better as the updates keep on coming, and I'm hoping that this thing turns out to be a success because I want more competition in this market so that way we, the consumers, get better products and let these companies fight over the market, right?